All right.
We're taking all the best old school wisdom and blending it with the top new school methods to bring you the optimal coaching strategies. This is the 80-20 Baseball Podcast with Coach Bo.
Welcome back, 80-20 Baseball community. Coach Bo here with you for our weekly get-together. Our 30 minutes-ish get-together once a week where we become better youth baseball coaches, better youth baseball parents, and for those players listening, better youth players. This week we have part 3, our final part of our interview with an old friend of mine, Coach Gore, Nick Gore. And Nick is going to talk about the challenges of coaching his own kids. And he'll also share out the biggest problem he sees in youth baseball today. Nick also shares out a very effective tip to get youth players to pay closer attention to the game. And lastly, he'll share out some pros and cons of private lessons for baseball players. Before we dive into that, I have a mental game tip suggestion for all of us coaches. Great coaching starts from calmness. Great coaching starts from calmness. Emotions almost inevitably make us a worse coach. They unnecessarily make us a worse version of ourselves out there on the baseball field as coaches and as parents and as people, right? And at the end of the day, even if we're well-intentioned, getting too emotional and letting our emotions control us, kind of like that quote last week I mentioned, we should share with our players and tell players, hey, it's okay to have emotions, just don't let your emotions have you. One of the first coaches I ever started studying, and really the first one I dove into deep and studied a lot, read every book he wrote, studied him closely, was Phil Jackson. Now, his nickname, as many of you know, is the Zen Master. And what intrigued me was how he would sit there, super calm, very stoic, while his team won 11 championships. And it wasn't just that Phil Jackson would be very calm and collected in the most intense games, in the most intense situations, playoffs, championship series. He was so much calmer than the average coach at that level. So the message and my suggestion that I'm trying to share right now is great coaching starts from calmness. Where we go from there will depend on the situation and what's needed. But great coaching always starts at a level of calmness. When the emotions kick in, that's when we become a worse version of ourselves. So if anything, find ways to be calmer as a coach, whether that's breathing, being present, being in the moment, doing some meditation each day, going for a 20-minute jog on a game day, right before a game, right before you get in the car to go to a game. Say things to yourself like, this is just youth baseball. While it's important to us, it's important as a coach to help my team improve and become better individuals and better people, a better team, to play better, to hustle. It's not life and death. It's a game. And great coaching starts from a calm place. Sometimes just relaxing the shoulders, easing the tension in our body, staying present, getting out of our own head and overthinking things and just taking in the moment, feeling the sunlight, doing some box breathing for 60 seconds while the inning is taking place. Those things can help keep us grounded, and it will be different for each of you, how you get to this place and what works for you. But great coaching starts from a calm place. Great coaching starts from calmness. Now, let's get into part 3 of our interview, our third and final part of the interview with Coach Gore, a longtime friend of mine who has a lot of wisdom about baseball and definitely youth baseball. And we're going to dive right into a strategy that Nick uses to help keep his players engaged and focused throughout the game, which in turn makes it more enjoyable, less boring, more fun. And then Nick is going to share out a specific part of youth baseball that he thinks can be coached up a lot more than it is and can help each part of a player's game. So with that said, let's dive in.
I'm going to tell you right now, the hardest thing in the world, by far the hardest thing in the world is to coach your own kids. Hands down, right? Because for so many reasons, you got to make sure that they don't give you attitude or treat you differently on the field or just all of the above, right? And then the whole daddy ball, well, his kid plays because of this and that. It's a constant struggle. And I don't think that gets talked about a lot with how difficult that actually is with your boys. I tell you right now, I mean, I've had my battles with the boys, right? And majority of it has always been effort type stuff too, right? Like I'm out here spending all my time time doing all this stuff for you guys, and you show up to practice and you don't care. I could care less. Like, I get it. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to do this. You're going to do that, whatever, right? Physical errors. I said, don't be lazy on the field. And those are my biggest battles with my boys, is personally, is because I know how I was growing up, and I know how we work, right? I mean, everything was max effort all the time and everything we did. Even when we would go over to Lust Park and go play over the line, it was a competitive, I'm giving you everything I got because you're not going to beat me type deal, right? But then nowadays, kids, like, they don't even do that anymore. I don't even think my boys have ever just gone on the field to go mess around and go play baseball. That's one of the most frustrating things too. It's like, we lived and breathed baseball all the time, but we also didn't have all these other distractions that they have now, right?
Yeah.
All this whole world of cell phones and video games and online. We got tired of Nintendo and we went outside and we threw the ball against the wall, or we went to go play over the line, or we rode our bikes and we did all this stuff too. But again, you hit on the head. The hardest thing is coaching your boys, and one, not treating them differently as far as playing time goes, but also not treating them differently because you can be harder on your kid because it's your kid, right? And then people will just understand, oh, well, I'm being hard on him because that's my boy. Yeah. You know what? A lot of times I've probably talked to my kids or in ways that I probably would never talk to someone else's child, right? Because he is my kid, but it's the hardest thing in the world to be able to separate those two. And now I'm at the point too, where a lot of times, I coach them, and we'll get into this too. Like, for as far as I play professional baseball, I pay coaches to do all of the private lessons with my boys, and I have for years. I will not do that anymore. I will never do one-on-one lessons. Yeah, if we hit in the backyard or whatever, but it's fine. But I pay somebody else to do it because it's so difficult to be coach dad, because I will always be dad, and dad will never know what's right, even though they know that I know what's right. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And I think it's the elephant in the room. We got to talk about the challenge of coaching your own kid. Now, I will say this. I truly believe, well, one, in youth sports, it almost always has to be a parent that's one of the kids. Usually it's a dad, but
right.
There's not a bunch of volunteers and a bunch of just random people just saying, I want to coach youth sports. And I think one thing that you really, hit on that's very important, the one-on-one lessons or any one-on-one coaching, that's a whole different ballgame when you're working with your own kid. And I recommend either you have somebody outside do it, somebody else do the one-on-one, or you really just make sure you don't say anything and you just really try to create a good training environment. And you coach them silently by creating a good environment, whether that's taking them to a good batting cage, or you get them in a situation where they can do well, or hit ground balls to them, hit quality ground balls to them, have them make some throws that are challenge them, but don't coach them. Don't even give them any input unless it's an injury situation or a health issue. Don't even coach them up on that. If you are going to do the one-on-one type of coaching, I think the best way to do it is just try to control the environment and don't worry about the message. In fact, I would bite my tongue on everything. There's no reason you couldn't just go an hour of hitting ground balls and throwing pitches to your kid without saying anything. And then at the end, or just say, hey, good job. Because like you said, Nick, it's going to backfire 9 out of 10 times. Unless there are those unique kids that do take it well, or maybe just it worked out right. But I will say this, when you're coaching your own kid's team, a lot of times you're just like, for example, I'll leave it at this. The listeners of this podcast, Nick, are going to be much better options for their kids' team than 99.9% of the other coaches or the other parents that don't listen to this podcast or take the initiative to be a better coach. And especially the coaches, like all the emails I get are from, you can tell these are quality parents. They want to be good coaches and they're doing it for the right reasons. That's a much better option than maybe another dad who doesn't care, is going out there and it's ego and it's the scoreboard and there's a lot of other issues going on there. So Definitely some things to consider there. Did you want to add to that before we bounce to the next question?
Yeah, we're good. We can bounce on.
All right. What coaching strategy do you use with your kids or players that you think is a little ahead of the curve? What's something you think you're doing right now that more coaches will be doing down the road?
One of the biggest things that I do and that we work with the boys is, we talked about a little bit earlier too, is preparedness, right? Having a plan and approach of what they're doing. And then on top of that, starting to pick up stuff, right? Starting to make sure that my shortstops and my second basemen are looking into the catcher's side to know what pitch is being thrown so they can adjust to and put themselves in a better position to make a defensive play. Being able to, as we're holding runners on, we have guys on base, be able to pick up stuff from pitchers to how to steal third base. Hey, is he a 1 look? Is he a 2 look? Is he a 2 look hold? We used to call it, I think back in high school, we used to call stealing second base, we called it the UCLA deal, right? You count in your head, he's a 1 look U or a 1 look. You sit and you say the letters in your head, UCLA. He looks once, he pitches on C, UC, boom, I steal second base or third base at that moment. how to start picking up on stuff on that end of it before it's even taught, right? How to learn the stuff that I didn't learn until I was in high school, college, and even professional baseball, right? I didn't learn that my shortstops and my second baseman should be looking at the catcher's sign and know every single pitch that's being thrown, relay to the third baseman and the first baseman so they know if there's going to be a fastball or off-speed pitch coming so they can adjust defensively, and how to relay those signs. Those are the things that we're working on. And then as far as the pitching goes, and as far as my catchers go, right? Understanding swings, how to adjust, how to have my center fielder adjust outfielders based off swings so I don't have to do it, right? You start teaching them, hey, this dude's late, right? Let's adjust. You will see that he's late. Let's adjust. And then to make sure that my catcher understands that, hey, we're throwing fastballs by this dude. We're not going to throw an off-speed pitch to allow him to have a chance. We're going to stay firm. Those are some of the philosophies that weren't even taught or even thought about when I was playing youth sports.
I think a starting point for youth coaches, especially as we stick to that kind of the 80-20 principle of really focusing on the bigger needle movers, but keeping it simple. I think what you could do as a coach, taking Nick's advice here, is teach your kids to coach up them to take initiative, to learn on their own, to look for things, to see how they can find little areas where the other team is giving them a base. Teach them to take initiative with their learning of the game. And so just push that. Say, hey, I want you guys to see if they're doing this. I want you to see if they're doing that. At the lower levels, I'd be very cautious with this. I mean, under 10 years old, when they start to get to middle school, well, Coach Bo, what if it distracts them too much? That's where you have to know your team and the level you're coaching. Definitely as they get more advanced, the more you can do this. But it also makes the game more fun for players. That downtime, now instead of that downtime being just looking around, they're looking at the other team's coach. They're looking at their infield. They're looking at their base runners. They're looking at their pitcher warming up. They're trying to pick things. So it does make the game more fun.
It keeps the kids engaged in between pitches. And that's the hardest thing to do. One of the hardest things to do at youth sports is keep the kids engaged. To have a task to do every time, like I said, catcher sign. If my shortstop and second baseman's job is required every single time to look into the catcher and see the signs and know what the pitch is and relay it, he might be early. I'm going to take a step to my right as I do my pre-pitch setup, because I'm anticipating the ball's going to be hit to my right, and I'm going to be more successful when the ball's hit to me or cover that hole.
Yeah.
It's those little things.
Yeah.
And it just helps with that whole process.
Like you said, it keeps the game more fun and fills their mind with productive things that are more focused on learning the game rather than sitting, my last strikeout. Oh, if I strike out again. You're giving them something to anchor their thoughts to that's productive, and it keeps the game more fun, especially for your more cerebral players. What's one of the most common youth coaching mistakes that you think is not commonly talked about?
One of the biggest things that I see is getting upset at kids for making physical errors, right? Having an expectation that these youth players are going to make every single defensive play and getting mad at these kids for making physical errors. I tell my boys all the time, hey, look, if you do everything right, if we pre-pitched, we set up, you moved your feet, you work through the ball and you kick it, or you catch the ball and you set your feet and you work through it and we make a throw and you sail, I'll never be mad at you, right? Because we're youth kids. We're not big leaguers. But on the flip side, if we have a kid that doesn't do any of that stuff, it's never, hey, you made a mistake. It's the reverse. You need to make sure that we're doing the stuff that we're talking about, moving our feet, trying to catch the ball inside off our left foot, moving through the ball, set our feet to make a throw type deal. But I see it all the time is coaches getting mad at the kid for making physical errors when they're young. And I get it. It's frustrating, but that's like the worst time to get mad at the kids because they already know that they made a mistake, especially if the game's on the line or all that. I mean, they're young kids. They're going through this very difficult game that's morally defeating.
Yep.
And the last thing they need is coach yelling at them, pointing out to everyone that they just kicked the ball. Like, we know they made a mistake. Everyone knows they made a mistake. Now you don't need to kick them when they're down.
For sure.
Right. So I think we need to do a better job of being positive with the kids when they're making physical mistakes. And I get it. Like mental mistakes, we can get a little more frustrated with because that's just not being focused, and we can get on them for that and have those conversations in the dugouts. But also too, is you need to correct whatever happened or coach it up at that spot, especially at the young age, right? Across the field. And I think too, what happens is a lot of coaches that at that point, after that inning or during that inning, whatever it is, they don't bring the kid in and then have a one-on-one discussion of why they messed up or what they needed to be or where they needed to go. And I think that a lot of times gets lost because the coach gets so worried, like, oh, I got to go coach third base, or I got to go do this, I got to go do that. They forget that, hey, I got on them a little bit for making a mistake on the field, right? Or pointed it out, but they forget to have that follow-up conversation with them to, hey, this is why we made a mistake, and have that one-on-one conversation in the dugout. And a lot of times I feel parents miss that as well when coaches are out there like, oh, coach is always yelling at them too, but they never hear those one-on-one conversations if a coach is doing it correctly or doing his job correctly. And that's one of the biggest things that I think is just really missed in sports, is that side, is just getting upset with kids with making physical mistakes.
What's one thing like in the youth baseball community that you'd like to see improved? And this could be anything in youth baseball. Is there something that you'd like to see improved, and what would be a solution in your eyes for that?
This is such a hard question. This is such a hard question because I think everyone knows what the biggest problem is with youth sports. It's the politics. It's the guys that are in charge running the league thinking that they have this power because they're in this position of league president or district umpire or whatever it is, right? And they make decisions based off in using their power of position to better themselves or put themselves in an advantage to win little league games. I mean, let's get down to, obviously we want to win games and teams want to win. And I think what happens is a lot of people unfortunately get so in the world of I want to win that they'll do anything to do that stuff. And it's not about winning or losing when you're coaching youth sports. It's about developing these players. But I don't know how to fix the politics of it. I don't know how to fix that side of it. And it's frustrating because we know that it's one of the biggest problems. In politics, it's such a big, broad category of stuff.
Sure.
But how do we fix that? If you could answer that question, then it would answer everyone's complaint. I think that's one of the biggest problems with youth sports. But I really don't know what the answer for that, because again, a lot of times is you have people that are volunteering their times as parents at this and that, and maybe people that didn't necessarily know how to baseball backgrounds or whatever, getting put into a position where all of a sudden they think they know what they're talking about, or they think they know what's best for the organization, or doing things that inherently makes them look bad outside of, or to the people that are looking in from the outside world. But that's what I wish I had an answer. I really do. I really wish I had an answer for the politics of it. Unfortunately, it's the world we live in, and I think it's only getting worse. I mean, we lived in that world growing up through high school, and I know a lot of the stuff that went on in college and in high school, and even playing pony and all-stars and Yorba Linda Little League and all that stuff. Yet looking back, it's like, man, it was really political even back then. And how do we get away from that? And it's frustrating because I saw some things happen in our last couple of seasons within our own league with people in power and people in position making decisions to make sure that their kid played, and they were just not putting the best all-star team together, but making sure my kid starts as people in power and not taking kids that were deserving of it. Like, I was just blown away that this stuff happens, and it's just beyond frustrating. And I really don't know how to get away from to even fix that problem. I think that's where you run into some of the biggest problems too, is when you start getting into all-star stuff, is when you see the biggest political pushes and the most unhappy parents is throughout the all-star programs for Little League sports.
Yeah, what about a random drop in the hat for the coaches? Maybe there's 4 coaches, 3 coaches, put the names in the hat, it's random. And then how about having the kids vote around the league, and maybe having all the coaches and kids vote anonymously and to do it that way? But yeah, I think something that I want to do on this podcast moving forward, have some more discussions about how we can make league-wide improvements, because those league-wide improvements can help the teams and the players. So I do want to jump to this next question here, the private lessons. What are some pros and cons of private lessons?
Well, obviously, private lessons are expensive, right? There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, right? It costs money to do this stuff. But if you have the financial means to do these lessons, I highly recommend them. And we recommend them even at the travel ball level. We can only do so much as a coach on a field as far as development of a player when we have a team environment. When I have 15, 16 guys on a team, or even in high school when you have 25, whatever guys on the team, whatever a coach takes, it's very difficult to do these one-on-one practices. For instance, we'll hit for an hour in the cages during our practice, right? Defensive for an hour, we'll hit for an hour, and I'll have 4 groups of 5, 6, 7 players because we combine teams. And we're in the cages and we're working on stuff, and I'm throwing batting practice to them. I give them their 8 pitches and the next guy, and they go 2 rounds of 8 and they go to the next station. They got 16 swings in the cage with me, and I can't really stop what I'm doing because I got an hour worth of batting practice I have to throw to how many kids that need to get through it. So we don't really get that one-on-one time to really break down. Yeah, will we say, hey, do this or do that, give them some little tips here and there, but we don't have time, unfortunately, to break down the swing and get them better. But when they're going to these one-on-one lessons, they're getting full one-on-one attention for half an hour, for an hour, for whatever it is. And they're continuously getting better and continuously working. And it's someone else's year too. It's, hey, coach is working on this and I'm working on that. And it's not just one thing, because as coaches, we all see something a little bit different, and we all have different ways of getting these players to develop. And maybe I have a private lesson coach that's working on stuff that says something to one of my players that it clicks for him. And then he gets better, and then I communicate communicate to them, hey, what are you working on with your coaches? What are you guys working on here? And I kind of piggyback off that. And then we work and we develop and we work a plan together. But I can't recommend enough kids getting into the training facilities and working out, because that's where you get better. You don't get better on team practice. You don't get better taking 5 ground balls at a team practice that you're out there for 2 hours, and you don't get better in a game, right? The game is to solidify, hey, the work that I've been busting my butt in the gym and private lessons and work and all that is now going out in the game. Okay, yep, everything I'm working on is doing well. I had good at-bats. I had success. Let's get back in the gym. Let's get back in the private lessons, and let's get back to working on getting better for that dedicated time. And so that's my view on private lessons. Like I said, they're expensive. I get it, but that's where the kids are going to get the most growth from, hands down. Now, also, I have to say is go find yourself a good facility or go find yourself a good coach. Don't just go and pay for because someone recommended it, right? Try different places, find a facility, and go from there.
Yeah, go out and test out. Don't sign a 10 lesson deal or a membership. Just say, hey, we want to test this out. Test out 3 or 4.
Yeah, coaches want to do that too. And it becomes such a money grab. It's like, oh, well, you need to pay for 10 lessons ahead of time and like lock kids in. It's like, that's the worst thing you can do. If you got a coach that wants to do that, I recommend go find a new coach.
Yeah, right away.
Honestly. Yeah.
Definitely the biggest growth will be in that one-on-one environment. I think getting a different take and having somebody else talk about that or give advice is good. There's a lot of good points you make there. The cost can be challenging, but I think you make a lot of good points about the pros and cons, and there's definitely some pros and cons. But speaking of one-on-one, what's something you do to utilize one-on-one work in practice?
It's very hard to get one-on-one work. I try to do smaller groups as far as stations go and work on things like that. Break guys up as infielders, outfielders, first base, and pitchers and that side of it, and just come up with drills that are going to pertain to all of those. I think one of the toughest things is you'll see a team out there doing a team defense and coach hits a ground ball to the shortstop and then he hits a ground ball to the second baseman, right? And everyone's just standing around, right? So it's very difficult, I think, personally, to do one-on-one time. But Little League, you usually have 12 players on a team. You have a couple coaches. You break them down into 3 groups of 4 or 4 groups of 3. And you can work on tee work. You can work on soft toss. You can work on pitching, defense, whatever it is. The biggest thing too is make sure that when you're doing practices, that when you're doing the fundamental stuff, that you break it down into smaller groups. And then when you're doing the bigger stuff, like your team defenses, like your bunt defense and relays and stuff, of course, you bring everyone back together. But I wouldn't focus any of those practices on doing big team defense stuff all the time. Now, I understand a lot of times coaches don't have a lot of help, or maybe they're out there by themselves and it becomes very difficult to do that. But small groups is the best way to get the closest you can get to one-on-one time during practice. And like I said, I think we touched on it a little bit before too. One of the best ways too is play catch with your kids. Like, be one of the guys when they're getting loose, like every practice, play catch with a new player so you can work one-on-one with them and not really take away from everybody else at that point.
That's an easy, quick to implement tip, and pretty much every coach can throw a baseball. And not only is it probably the most important part of the game at the youth level, outside of maybe getting your hitters better, but throwing the ball, that's probably number one, and hitting's probably close up there, but getting better throwers. Now, I know you had mentioned something about speed and agility. I think we talked about this a little bit before. Why do you think speed and agility, especially at the youth age, is not worked on or very rarely worked on? And how can coaches do better at this?
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, it's no one thinks about it, because when we get to the baseball field, we think about baseball stuff. How do we go catch a ground ball? How do we throw? How do we do whatever? Our boys, they're developing, right? They're growing into their bodies, and speed, agility, coordination is never worked on in practice outside of fielding ground balls, footwork, any of that stuff. And if our boys can't control their bodies because they're going into themselves, and you can't ask them to do to certain steps or certain agility moves, then how are we going to ask them to move their feet and put them in a position to catch a ground ball if they are struggling with just the overall control of their body? So what I do before practices, especially with the youth guys, is during warm-ups. I mean, obviously we stretch and we do that, but we can 15 minutes into a practice, and sometimes this becomes really important. I set up the ladders and we do ladder drills. I just went out and got 2 ladder drills and just basic stuff, 1 foot every hole, 2 feet every hole, and start going through that. And it's wild to see that kids at 10, 11, 12 years old can't put 2 feet in every hole in the ladder. They mentally they struggle, or 2 feet in, 2 feet out, right? And go down the line sideways, and they struggle with it tremendously. And I always point out, I say, guys, if you can't even control your feet to stick it in each section of the ladder, how are you ever going to control your feet to go catch a ground ball? So again, it's controlling and training the mind. And it's so simple. They can go through it 1 foot every hole, 2 feet every hole, turn sideways, go sideways to the left, sideways to the right, do the little karaoke. And then when they come out of it, just go around some cones with a run forward, shuffle, back pedal, back to the line. Just those little simple things that that during warmups, and it helps warm them up and get their bodies ready after stretch or pre-stretch.
Yep.
And it's never worked on. And I always say speed is one of the most important things in the game. Speed never goes in a slump. If I can teach my kids to be bigger, faster, stronger, they're going to be an advantage. If they can hit the ball and beat out a play because they're faster, because they learn how to control their body and run in a better posture, in a better position, they're going to be a better baseball player. But it doesn't ever get talked about. And I think, if you remember back in high school, maybe it was by the time like it was either our junior year or our senior year, Coach Domini finally went over and got the track and field coach to come over and start doing a lot of the drills that they do for their sprinters with us. How to run properly in the right position, how to put our hands, how to strike the ground. I remember doing drills where we had our hand against the fence and we were literally just kicking the ground with one foot, like an ostrich about to go stomp somebody. I'm like, wow, like this really makes sense. Like, why don't we ever as baseball players learn how to run faster?
Yes.
It gets lost, but God, speed is such a major tool in every sport. And yet coaches, we don't think about it because we want to teach how to clear the ground ball, how to do this, how to do that. Well, let's take that 15 minutes right after we stretch. And like I said, it only takes about 15 minutes to get through it. Boom, just do a speed and agility stuff before every single practice. And then once the body's nice and hot and sweaty and everything's moving around, that's when I go into my throwing program. So I go stretch, speed and agility. Once they're got their heart rate going and they're really moving around, boom, that's when I put them in the catch or into their throwing program. Now I have a program every single time that they're expected. We get to the field, we jog, we stretch, we do our speed and agility stuff, we do our throwing program, and then we get into practice. So I've seen kids go from 12 to 13 and come back and be like average 12-year-old players, and then come back as a 13-year-old going like, and figured it out. I'm like, dude, what happened in the last 6 months? I'm like, oh, I started speed and agility. I started training with the speed and agility guy. And I was like blown away with how much it improves their overall athleticism and overall ability to be a baseball player.
100%.
Because they're learning how to control their body when they run. And it sounds like the simplest thing. And it really is the simplest thing. But gosh, if you can run in a better posture and get down the line a little bit quicker, instead of being out by 2 steps, you're safe by 2 steps. Or not getting to that fly ball, or not having the arm strength or whatever it is. Like, it's all part of it. Speed, strength, and agility stuff. And even at a younger age, right? You want to keep kids obviously out of the gym when they're younger, but there's no reason why you can't work on getting them faster and getting their conditioning up and making them faster players.
Yeah, athleticism plays in every position on the baseball field, just getting more athletic, faster. And I think you can get enough strength from doing those things. Like agility drills can build leg strength and core strength.
Right. I mean, I can't emphasize enough just athleticism and working on becoming more athletic. It's something that's hardly ever worked on at the youth level. And it's probably the most important time to work on it as we're growing and developing into our bodies.
Yep.
I mean, shoot, when I was, you probably did the same thing between when I was 10 and 12, whatever, 10 and a half, 12, I grew 9.5 inches. I was the most uncoordinated kid ever. I was like a baby giraffe with everything I did. But I wish at that point, if I would have had some type of like speed and agility training, maybe I would have grown into my body a little bit better. I ended up okay, but I just remember being just an absolute train wreck for a long time. Even on the baseball field, like tripping over everything and like falling down. I was just a mess. Again, it's our boys are growing and they're constantly playing catch up to their body. And as soon as they grow into their body, they're growing again, right? So it's a constant battle. So we need to make sure that they're constantly working on just overall coordination. And it's missed, I think, throughout not just baseball, but I think a lot of youth sports in general.
100%. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to share at this time?
No, I think, yeah, like I said, we covered a lot. I mean, I can get obviously even more detailed on a lot of this stuff.
Well, I'll tell you what.
But I think we covered a lot of stuff, and this is a good experience to talk about this stuff. So I appreciate you having me on and being part of your podcast.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. And yeah, definitely. I know you and I could talk for hours and hours, probably days. I'd love to have you come back on and drill down on a few topics that we didn't get to, and maybe drill down on a few of these topics here. But hey, thank you so much for your time, Nick. This was a lot of fun.
And like I said, I'll look forward to doing it again.
Definitely. All right, that wraps up part 3 of the interview. Really thankful that Nick could come on and share out so much over the last 3 weeks. He's a good man, and I think his background is perfectly suited for this podcast and to have on this podcast. Very thankful that he could come on. So we're going to take a break from interviews for about a month. The plan moving forward is to do 4 to 5 non-interview episodes and then mix in an interview. And the interviews usually span 2 to 3 episodes. And I really try hard to keep it around 30 minutes-ish. Sometimes it goes over, sometimes it's less, but on average, it's about 30 minutes. And the reason behind that is, one, I want to keep it going. I want to sustain it. And I take my own advice, not biting off more than I can chew. I want the podcast to be good for all of you. And I want everybody to be able to easily consume it consistently each week. And podcasts that are 3 hours or come out every day, those can quickly get backlogged and thrown in the queue. And I don't want that. I want it to be something that you hear every week. You can take it in, get this information year round, and become a much better coach. All right, when you stop this podcast, if you wouldn't mind just leaving a review or a rating, that really helps this podcast, and send it to a friend. Forward it over to a friend real quick. Just send them the link. Say, hey, you might like this. That would be very much appreciated. A great way to support and give back to the podcast. And until next week, keep taking care of that health so you can be there to take care of your families like I know you're doing. Let's be there for our close friends when they need us, especially those friends that have been there and continue to be there for us. And let's take this information out there and put it into play. Don't go down looking. Don't strike out looking. Put it into play. Until next week, adios.
This has been the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass. Take it to the field.